Hello, and welcome to another episode of Blood, Guts, and Social Commentary. Today I'm going to talk about the history of the rating system, which was a viewer request. The story of at least the US rating system starts in 1894. Thomas Edison made a film, but one of his employees made another film which featured a dancing girl. This projection was banned in several states due to her revealing her legs and undergarments as she twirled. This is possibly the earliest example of film censorship. We move on to 1897 when James Corbett and Bill Fitzsimmons boxed in Carson City, Nevada. Prize fighting was illegal in a lot of states, but it was not illegal at the time to film it and then show the film. This was landmark in several regards. It was technically the first documentary, it was the first feature-length film. It also caused several states to have to rewrite their laws about prize fighting to include recorded material so anybody that then showed the film could be fined. Laws have never had to deal with that before because at the time the technology didn't exist. For a fairly long period of time, the idea of what could and could not be shown on film varied state to state. In 1915, the United States Supreme Court made a landmark decision that firmly established that censorship could be applied to films. The Mutual Film Corporation, which was a company that produced newsreels, argued that their film should be protected under the First Amendment due to freedom of speech. The Supreme Court disagreed, and in the case of Mutual versus Ohio Industrial Commission, Chief Justice Edwards White wrote, "The exhibition of moving pictures is a business, pure and simple, originated and conducted for profit like other spectacles, and not to be regarded as part of the press of the country or as origins of public opinion within the meaning of freedom of speech and publication." While you can argue that newsreel footage is essentially what their version at the time was of our local news, it just at the time was not protected, and this set up a fairly dangerous precedence. In 1922, the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, or MPPDA, was formed. It was headed by former Postmaster General and head of the Republican National Committee, William Hayes. His job was essentially to lobby Washington on behalf of the movie industry. He also established a list of common rejections as a don't list, meaning never do it, and a be careful list. Things like couples being in bed together, because at the time that was very salacious even if they were married. But it could be forgiven in certain contexts if it was treated with a lot of moral sensitivity. In 1930, a production code was established. It set forth three basic tenets. No picture shall be produced that will lower the moral standards of those who see it. Hence, the sympathy of the audience should never be thrown to the side of crime, wrongdoing, evil, or sin. Correct standards of life, subject only to the requirements of drama and entertainment, shall be presented. Law, natural or human, shall not be ridiculed, nor shall sympathy be created for its violation, which kind of echoes the first rule, but hey, I'd make it. The MPPDA also joined forces with the Legion of Decency, which was created by the Catholic Church, meaning all films put out had the seal of approval from the Catholic Church. This did cause some issues. At the time, films could be rated B, which announced that it was morally objectionable in part. There was also a rating of C, which meant it was condemned by the Legion of Decency. Later, these both were merged into one rating of O for morally offensive. Some notable examples from this time period are the movie Miracle on 34th Street, which was given a B rating due to the mother being divorced. Also, in the film The Aviator, there was a scene that portrayed a very real instance where Howard Hughes' film, The Outlaw, was deemed offensive because they said he was focusing too much on Jane Russell's bosom. Hughes famously argued that the emphasis on her bosom was necessary to the plot. Now it's hard to imagine anybody finding the movie Miracle on 34th Street to be offensive, considering it's played on cable all the time, and it's hard to, at least in America, run into any man, woman, or child that's never seen it. At this time, the MPAA was also established. In 1940, a Hollywood antitrust case declared it illegal for studios to own their own theaters. This was huge because it opened the doors for exhibitors to pick and choose what they wanted, even if it wasn't approved. In 1952, we get another huge landmark ruling. The Supreme Court reversed their decision that they made in 1915 by saying expression by means of motion picture is included within the free speech and free press. 1968 brings us to Jack Valenti. He served under President Lyndon B. Johnson, and he was the White House Special Assistant to the Press, ended up becoming the president of the MPAA. As Valenti put it, the Hays Code had the odious smell of censorship. While the smell of censorship still lingers a bit and will be discussed later, he did realize that the Hays Code was way too subjective, and especially when you're trying to match it to the Catholic Church's wants and desires for what people can and cannot see. Because even at that time in America, not everybody was Catholic. This also caused an overhaul of the rating system. From 1968 to 1970, the ratings were G for general audiences, M for mature audiences, R for restricted, under 17 is admitted as long as they have a parent with them, and X. X originally was not admitted if under 17. In 1970, the rating system was changed again. M was changed to PG for parental guidance because they agreed that mature audiences was a little too confusing. The MPAA trademarked every single rating except for the X rating. This caused it to be hijacked by the porn industry. They used it to hype their movies. They put in several X's, so this is where we get like triple X from. This implied that the movie was much more risque and obscene than others. Some notable examples of mainstream films that were rated X, even though they weren't pornographic, are A Clockwork Orange, The Evil Dead, and Midnight Cowboy. In 1984, Steven Spielberg actually influenced the addition of the PG-13 rating, because when his 1977 film Jaws was released, it was rated PG, but everybody agreed it was a little too violent for young kids, but it was not enough to deem an R rating. The PG rating actually does carry over to Jaws today. In 1984, he made Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. He was also an executive producer on Gremlins. Both of these got a PG rating, but had the same issue as Jaws. Spielberg made the suggestion that a PG rating was a little too broad and suggested they add a PG-14 rating. In 1985, the MPAA instituted a PG-13 rating, and Red Dawn was the first film to receive this mark. Going back to the good old X rating, in 1990 the MPAA completely abandoned it because they believed X had just completely become associated with the porn industry. This is when X was replaced by the NC-17 rating. Originally it meant no one under 17 was to be admitted. In 1996 though, this changed to anyone 17 and under couldn't be admitted, making this 18 and up only. While the MPAA has certainly improved from the Hays laws, there's still a decent amount of criticism that surrounds it. Trey Parker and Matt Stone, creators of South Park, when they made their independent film Orgasmo, completely devoid of a studio, they were given the dreaded NC-17 rating. NC-17 is problematic because most theaters will not play them. Also, at the time when rental distributors like Blockbuster were huge, they wouldn't carry NC-17 movies. So essentially, if you got an NC-17 rating from the MPAA, your movie didn't get seen. This happened with them at Orgasmo when they had no studio backing. When they made the South Park movie, though, they had the backing of a studio. When the MPAA called and tried to give them an NC-17 rating, they assumed they weren't going to get notes again. They gave them almost frame by frame how to get an R rating. Both feel this is a strong indication that studios do still very much control the rating system and are absolutely in the business of censorship instead of just rating films for who can and cannot see them. They found it ridiculous that just because they had a studio backing them, that the rules changed from when they had no studio backing them. Jamie Babbitt, the director of the 1999 film But I'm a Cheerleader, also received an NC-17 rating, which she did complain about because the objection to it was apparently having one of her characters touch themselves in a sexual way, The thing about the scene, though, is the person was fully clothed. She was actually wearing a ball gown. There was no flesh shown. You simply just knew what she was doing. Jamie wouldn't have been so offended and upset by this, though, had American Pie not come out the same year. Included in the trailer for American Pie is a very obvious scene of Jason Biggs masturbating with a pie. So while she was getting ridiculed and given a bad rating for having a scene that implied masturbation but nothing was shown, we have a movie like American Pie that had massive studio backing with Jason Biggs dropping trowel and having sex with a pie. The problem is the appeals process for the MPAA does not allow you to reference other films. So had Jamie Babbitt tried to appeal, she couldn't have said, well, you can't say I'm an NC-17, but say American Pie is an R. It doesn't work. You can't use other people to show precedence. There have also been notable examples like Team America, where the director admitted they shot way more gratuitous scenes and graphic scenes than they ever wanted. Since Team America has the infamous quote-unquote puppet sex scene, they said originally that scene went on for, I believe, 20, maybe 15 minutes, with things they never wanted to include because they thought it was too much. They just wanted to give the MPAA something to cut. And a lot of directors have done this. They'll shoot more than they wanted to, make things more extreme than they wanted to, and they assume if they send it off to the MPAA, they'll cut it down to where the director actually wanted it, because the MPAA just needs something to pull out. A similar incident happened with the film Shadow Boxer. There's a scene where a man is nude, he is arguing with somebody, and the director sent 3 different takes in different states of, let's just call it, arousal. He knew he wanted about half erect and ended up getting it because the MPAA clearly didn't want to show a fully erect. And somehow flaccid was also offensive. I'm not quite sure on that one. Again, the whole point of the MPAA is simply supposed to be rating things. It's to keep certain people from seeing certain things. While, yes, people are probably going to stumble across things, especially with the internet now, it's a way of keeping children from seeing something they really shouldn't. As the director of Shadow Boxer put it, he's working out some demons right now, and while his son may be able to watch his movies someday, currently they're just inappropriate for him. But it keeps coming under fire as being a way to passively censor films and keep things from the public. Director John Waters, when he created A Dirty Shame, he swore he made it as as inoffensive as he could. They discussed sexual acts, but rarely did they actually perform them, and when they did, it was something innocuous like splashing, which was a girl that got sexual arousal by covering herself in food. She didn't have to get undressed for this, she simply was just putting food on herself. It's like a messy baby eating, except for there was a sexual component and the person was grown. But the film received an NC-17, and when he asked why, he was given, well, it was the tone of the film. And that is always the biggest issue with these movies. When you are given notes about, well, you can trim a little here, cut a little here, it then becomes the choice between the director and possibly the studio for who does what where. What is worth keeping, what is not worth keeping. When you get a tone, there's no fixing that. You pretty much have to scrap it and reshoot. John Waters in this instance just decided to take the NC-17, which for him at this point, being the king of trash, wasn't going to hurt his reputation, but it was definitely going to hurt the amount of distribution. While video chains like Blockbuster have gone the way of rotary telephones, it still does hurt you to receive an NC-17 rating, while video-on-demand services and streaming services have started to offer less censored options. When a Serbian film came out, there actually was a site that popped up. I don't know how soon after its release, because I never heard of the service before, but I explored it. At the time, they were claiming legally there was really no stipulations, or you didn't really have to be rated to do a streaming service. So essentially, you paid them money, and you would get a digital copy to stream of a Serbian film completely uncensored. And at the time when it first came out, that was incredibly difficult to come by because that film was so heavily censored in pretty much every country. But as the technology progresses, the laws are eventually going to catch up. We saw how quickly it happened earlier in film with taking things from state by state to making a governing body, to the prize fighting becoming illegal to show even on film. Every time somebody tries to find a way to circumvent the rules, the law is eventually going to catch up with it. A few years back, there actually was a push in Hollywood for directors to make more NC-17 films, because another big reason for the issue with the NC-17 rating was the film Showgirls. In 1995, this was one of the first films to carry the NC-17 rating, and they touted that to its fullest extent. The problem is the movie bombed. Commercially, it was just not a success. It's really become a massive punchline. So when the first film that touted this and used it as a marketing tool bombed so terribly and was viewed by most people, and the biggest objection to it did seem to be the sex was just there for sex sake. It was just gratuitous, didn't make sense. So now everybody wants to avoid it because no one wants to be called or compared to Showgirls. So not only do we have the issue with distribution, we also have the issue with just the bad taste in everybody's mouth about it. It might be worth scrapping the NC-17 rating and going for something else that says 18 and up, but there's no telling what the MPAA is going to do, or if they're even going to try and keep up with streaming to keep it censored. Thank you for listening. If you like what you're hearing, please like, comment, subscribe. Like I said, I did this as a viewer request, so I hope the viewer enjoyed it. And if you don't like what you're hearing, as always, please give me some feedback. Thank you.